lot of his most successful videos is this Jenga storytelling method, right? Where you know what the end's gonna be. Like in Jenga, Bilal, what happens at the end of a Jenga game?
Everything drops.
Everything drops. You know that's the end, but you want to see how to get there. So in that game, in that video we just described, right? The five
You know what's gonna happen at the end, but you're wondering what's gonna happen in the meantime.
It's like, will someone have to take a shit like 3 days in? And like if they have to take a shit, will they shit their pants?
That's true, actually. Yeah, I think that's a good. I didn't even think of that.
This is like, it's a storytelling method, which is a very YouTube centric, because I mean, MrBeast says in this document that he studied YouTube for 30,000 hours and is written in the most like informal manner, which I really appreciate. He's just like, he took 30,000 hours of mastering YouTube, the platform, the algorithm, and turned it into 36 pages.
Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. You got Trung fan, Bilal Zaidi. Trung, let's get straight into this MrBeast style, because we got it in the title, we got it in the thumbnail. Let's make him proud. Let's get straight to the topic this time and not banter for 10 minutes.
Even this preamble is taking too long.
Yeah, he would not be happy with the retention on this on the graph, but let's get straight into it. The MrBeast team, their doc got...
How to Succeed at MrBeast Productions is the name of this leaked memo that's been blown up.
Great title. So we're going to break it down, all of our favorite parts of it today. That'll be most of the pod. And the second part, we'll get to most likely The Power Broker is a famous book that's turning 50. We'll hopefully get to that as well.
Robert Caro, the legend about Robert Moses.
There we go.
New York urban planner. But let's focus. We've already lost 80% of the listeners. MrBeast would not be happy with the retention here.
But Trung, so you've gone through it. I know there's a lot of threads online about this, but let's first of all paint a picture really quickly for the people who don't know who MrBeast is, which is most people on here know who he is. He's the #1 YouTuber in the world. Let's just keep it to that, right? He's been building out his team. They do these super viral videos, hundreds of millions of views. I think they've got 300 million subscribers. Incredibly successful across all the channels. Yeah. So let's talk about the doc though, because it looks like the purpose of it is there's people coming into the team and they need to replicate what is in his mind and get it out to people. He can't do this one-on-one with people anymore. So tell me about what you loved about it, because you were going on about it in a group chat, and I was skimming through a lot of it and I enjoyed it too. But why don't you tell me what you loved so much about it?
Well, we recently did an episode about founder mode versus manager mode, right? So for the listeners that haven't read Paul Graham, co-founder of Y Combinator, he wrote the super viral article titled Founder Mode. And the whole point was about when companies grow, there's this tension between does the founder, CEO, if those remain the roles typically, which they do, they're in the nitty gritty, right? They're on the ground, micromanaging everything, versus a manager mode where you bring in like a McKinsey, Goldman, Harvard Business School guy. You delegate. The interesting thing about this document is it's about delegation, right? In the sense of MrBeast, like you said, can no longer do everything. Like MrBeast business, you had mentioned the 300 million subscribers across all his channels. So it's a main one where, let's just give it for people that have never watched. Like he'll do these, he said the average video that he looked at in this document is about 14 minutes. And his videos are like kind of these challenges if you've never seen them. It's like the famous ones are if you put, he's got like 5 friends with their hands on a Lamborghini, which is also my favorite. The last person to take their hands off gets the Lamborghini, right?
Yeah, so it's like these absurd things. Like you read it and you're like, what the hell is this? And you want to watch it for that reason. But the
setup is genius because it's called Jenga storytelling. And a lot of his most successful videos is this Jenga storytelling method, right? Where you know what the end's going to be. Like in Jenga, Bilal, what happens at the end of a Jenga game?
Everything drops.
Everything drops. You know that's the end, but you want to see how to get there. So in that game, video we just described, right? The 5
You know what's going to happen at the end, but you're wondering what's going to happen in the meantime.
It's like, will someone have to take a shit like 3 days in? And like if they have to take a shit, will they shit their pants?
That's true, actually. Yeah, I think that's a good. I didn't even think of that.
This is like, it's a storytelling method, which is a very YouTube centric, because I mean, MrBeast says in this document that he studied YouTube for 30,000 hours and is written in the most like informal manner, which I really appreciate. He's just like, it's like he's downloading.
Like him talking to you directly. Yeah.
He took 30,000 hours of mastering YouTube, the platform, the algorithm, and turned it into 36 pages. So this thing leaked. I have no idea how it leaked. In the past 3 months, I'll give a little bit more context of what's going on with MrBeast. He basically got so big on YouTube. He's and with a lot of YouTubers, they try to jump into mainstream Hollywood, right? Like Bilal, you probably know this. It's very difficult. They're two different worlds, right? And old Hollywood doesn't particularly like YouTubers. They're totally different games.
Well, actually, Trunk, just going through it. I mean, it might be good. I know you've got a bunch of points, but this brings up, this is kind of chronological here. One of the first things he puts in this, which I really appreciate, he said, what's the goal here? We make the best YouTube videos possible, in all caps YouTube.
Yes.
And I think that's already quite a telling sign of what's to come. It's kind of like the videos. It's like you're telling them up front what this is and what it isn't. And the next topic is, I don't know how traditional media does things. This is not Hollywood, essentially. And like you said, like if you're writing a rule book for how to make a 2-hour movie, this is not that. And that's what makes it so useful, is because it's so focused on this specific goal.
I like, you know what, you're bringing a little bit of MrBeast here. Let's structure this a bit more. Why don't we just walk through the doc after I finish with the context? So you just lead us through it.
Perfect.
So the way you framed it is, that's literally the top. He's like, this is a YouTube video. But then he also adds a little bit afterwards. He goes, the reason I'm saying it's a YouTube video is also because I think YouTube is going to eat all of media.
Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers, he's not wrong.
I was saying it to my missus this morning about how many subscribers, and she was like, what? She was like, that's more than the population of the US, which, like, what media channel has that? Pretty much, right? No one reaches that many people.
Well, here's so his point that he's making. And again, the haters are going to come out, and they do. And we're going to talk a bit more about why he's getting criticized, because there has been a lot of blowback to MrBeast
fair
in the
enough.
past 6
and
months.
I think we should do that too. That's important.
Is the aspect of this, which is interesting, is he's saying all this. He's like, why did he say what you said? It's a YouTube video. Please remember that. It's because he believes YouTube is eating all of media, right? And I want to ask Rafa to throw up this chart, because I couldn't find it. It's from App Annie. It basically shows the monthly, hourly watching for YouTube versus all the other streaming services. YouTube is like 4 to 5x Netflix. I think it's like 20 hours versus 4 hours a month on average. When I saw that Netflix was 4 hours on average, I'm like, man, that feels low, but whatever.
I guess it's average because there's some people are doing 20 and then some are just at 1,
But if the average person on YouTube is 20, I mean, dude, I do
That's
way
wild.
more than 20 hours, man. It's because of all the podcasts, right?
I think I did 20 this week, and it's Tuesday.
That Bilal did that in one
was a long
walk
day.
yesterday.
Yeah, it was a one long day.
Bilal, but hold on.
Yeah.
So that's the setup. He's like, this is for YouTube. And the reason I'm saying this, I've made my entire bet. This is MrBeast on YouTube, because YouTube is going to eat all of media. I believe that. I agree with him. And then, listen, Christopher Nolan can make one movie every 5 years. It's going to be way better than anything MrBeast makes. I get that. But there's also only so many movies of the decade you can make. There's only going to be one Oppenheimer in the past decade, right? That's a different conversation we're having. We're talking about saturating attention. And there's pros and cons that we talked about on the show, but let's start walking through the doc. Hit me the next.
That makes sense. Well, and then the other thing I do want to say is, not only is it a YouTube video, it's very specific to their style of YouTube video, which the goal of his channel is go viral, go super viral.
Like these challengey type videos.
Challengey. It's like, if you think of old school TV, it's like challenge TV. You'd have these big challenges, or you'd have like the stunt stuff, like Jackass equivalent, Survivor.
American Gladiator. Yeah, Jackass. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I would say a lot of these things, like most advice, you take what is useful and you disregard the other part, because it's not for everyone. For example, I've seen him on long form podcasts, let's say, and he's going to them like, hey, don't say this, because you're like messing with retention. And that's a different goal. So like that there are people that are creating different things on YouTube, which aren't the challenging style things, which a lot of these things you can still take a lot from, but is not, you would be doing like a disingenuous style of conversation if you were trying to do a 2-hour conversation like their style.
It's a very different, it's a very specific.
But you can still take something from it, for sure.
Well, here, let me, I'm jumping ahead here just because it's related to what you're saying. he actually breaks down by minute every part of, dude, the amount of alpha he dropped in this document, it got leaked obviously, is insane.
Yeah.
MrBeast did a minute by minute breakdown of where to retain viewers on YouTube. So I'm just going to walk through it now, and I want you to opine on what you just said though. This is specific to his style of video. We mentioned the hands on the Lamborghini, the Jenga storytelling, right? And so many people are trying to copy it. It's crazy. But he says, and this is not going to be surprising, minute 1, most important, shocker. Everyone knows that. But he actually says something else in there, which is, this is the alpha. He goes, the lighting in minute 1 makes such a big difference. He's like, if you're going to spend money on like the best lights, it has to be reflected in that first minute, because that's when people drop off. And I don't know what the drop-off number is, but you probably know better than me. But I think the drop-off after the first minute is quite large. It's like 20.
It's normally 80% for most people, and for him it's less because they've worked so much on it. It's like 30%, right? But the whole point is it's massive still. And then he says the next big part is minutes 1 through 3. And here's some more alpha. He goes, when people are telling like a chronological story, like even his Lamborghini, like we'll just stick with the hands-on Lamborghini thing. They'll like kind of like pace it through and maybe show like, you know, a bit more of that when the thing started. But he's like, no. Minutes 1 through 3, you need to show so much progression in the story. And he's like, so he's like time-lapsing stuff. So if you watch any of his videos, you'll notice all these tricks. And he goes, minute 3 is the next big kind of drop-off point. So minute 3, he says, is called the re-engagement. And he says, this is when you kind of want to do your biggest, splashiest part of the thing. The one you spend the most time and money on. So an example they had was they wanted, did you ever watch this one? They challenged somebody to live inside of a circle on a field for, I think, 90 days. And if you did it, you got $500,000. Insane challenge, right? Yeah,
like, again,
ridiculous.
a Jenga storytelling type of thing. You know kind of what the resolution is. You want to watch it. At the 3-minute mark in this video, they literally dropped a house. Like a house is dropped into this circle in a field. It costs a lot of money. Crane, buy the house, drop it. He's like, but that's what you have to re-engage the viewer. And then minutes 3 to 6, you start piling on the more expensive production stuff to keep people engaged. And then he said when you get to the 6-minute mark, he called it, his terminology, the lull, L-U-L-L, you know, like a lull, right? He's like, when you get somebody to 6 minutes on my videos, which is about halfway, about 40% through 14 minutes, they're done. Like they, at that point, they're gonna like sleepwalk to the end of the video. Like they're so engaged into the story and they need to see the resolution that their brain's almost on autopilot. And the way he described it was crazy. He's like, his understanding of human psychology is astounding, right? Like based on his videos. But so that was his minute by minute breakdown. Love your thoughts on that. And I will add one more thing. He called the second half of the video, so I called it 6 to 14 minutes on average. He called it the back half, the second half. He says that even though people are on autopilot, don't mail it in. Now, that's the thing about him from this document that I appreciate. If you read about any of the greats, Francis Ford Coppola, like, I mean, we'll talk about Kanye, like a great artist, right? Vincent van Gogh. Obviously different types of people, but with different types of quality of output. But you notice these same things. It's just like obsession with the tiniest detail. You know what I mean? And I know I'm going to get roasted for putting MrBeast on the same level as Vincent van Gogh, but I'm talking about the amount of deep level of attention he puts in and work is like, it's on that.
But you know why, Trung? Those people are the same people who laughed at YouTube 10 years ago and said it's cats on a skateboard. Yeah. And I'm obviously joking as well. It's not the same. But in his field, he is. That's the truth, right?
He's
like,
the Vincent van Gogh of his field. Yeah, he is.
It's the same people that will be like, you talk about Joe Rogan as the #1 podcaster, and they're like, oh, I don't even like his stuff, which is fine. You don't have to like his stuff. He's the undisputed #1. Just I don't like Vincent van Gogh stuff. Let's just say that. I mean, I'm messing around, but you know, we don't. It's not for everyone. That's the point.
Have you been to MoMA? Have you seen the Starry Night?
Yeah. No, I'm. Okay. It is legit. Let's not mess around. I was just trying to add some points in there, but you get my point there. All right, but let's keep it going. I do like that breakdown. I think you tweeted that out as well, so people should go to Trung T Fan on Twitter. You can see the highlights you put there as well for that minute by minute breakdown. Let's keep it moving. What was the next thing we had here? So the amount of hours you work is irrelevant. This is great, right?
This is a managerial thing. It's meritocracy. That's the thing. Is like, and you know, did you have any other thoughts on that?
No. Yeah, what I was going to say, well, the example he said is record a story about James solving a problem in 30 minutes a team of 5 couldn't do in a week. And that's kind of the high level. This is what's great about this doc. It's not just applicable to video. It's like you can apply that to lots of things. I mean, I know Jack Butcher, our boy, has a visualized value thing about this. In fact, what's it called? It's like the... you know, when it's like an invoice and it's like $1 for the time and $99 for knowing which screw to turn or whatever.
Or it's
the same thing.
Picasso. It's the Picasso story. It's like, you know, the famous one in Paris. Somebody comes up with him in a cafe. Can you draw me a picture? He draws a picture and they're like, how much? Is like $10,000. And they're like, well, that only took you 10 minutes. He's like, it took me 50 years and 10 minutes. And
actually, I'll jump ahead because there's one part which is related to this, which funnily enough, you talked about founder mode. Yeah. Not hiring the McKinsey types, but funnily enough, he says there's a whole section on used consultants. That doesn't necessarily mean McKinsey.
He means find the expert in the field, right? He's like talking about knowledge transfer.
Exactly. But this is the sentence I'll pull out. He said consultants are literally cheat codes. Need to make the world's largest slice of cake. Start off by calling the person who made the previous world's largest slice of cake LOL, which I also love. There's a lol.
Dude,
which makes complete sense.
It's the smartest thing ever. And
it's obvious, but people, that's the thing. People don't do that half the time. They're like,
it's obvious. Exactly.
People won't do it
though, right? They, like you said, they'll go to the library, get like $30 on making cakes. And, but just to rewind to what you said about, the time, James is his right-hand man. Like, that's his whole point. Like, James, I believe it's James, right? Is that his name? Has been in the trenches with him, creating MrBeast Productions. And he has all that knowledge, right? It's that Picasso story. He has that 10,000 hours along with MrBeast on making these videos. And he does say those, like, you know, I would love to have people that grind 100 hours a week, but it's like, that's not the point. All he's saying is, you will get to expertise way faster if you're grinding 100 hours a week, right? But like the actual output itself is not what's necessary. And he even starts this entire document off by telling people, I genuinely believe if you intently read and understand the knowledge here, you'll be a much better setup for success. So read the book and pass the quiz and I'll give you $1,000, right? So he cares so much about this knowledge transfer. And it's like the example you brought about consultants. Like, that's what it is. It's not about shortcuts necessarily. It's about, you know, be smart about it. It's like,
I think in a way there, because there's I think the word shortcut, people think of doing things in a rash way, not truly understanding something. But the thing is, like, I'm rereading Poor Charlie's Almanac, you know, straight up thread boy life, but it's a phenomenal book, right? And I was pulling up one of the quotes here. It's the whole, we had David Senra, our boy on the pod, Founders Pod. The whole basis of that podcast, and basically a lot of what I've done in Create Lab too, is like, it takes so long trying to figure stuff out yourself. And when someone's done 30,000 hours of this, or they've done whatever in your field, made the biggest slice of cake, you can go and sit on their shoulders real quick and be like, yo, what's going on?
Bro,
let me jump on board.
What's going on with this cake? I would love that phone call. Hey, I'm with MrBeast Productions. We're trying to make the biggest slice of cake in the world. Like, what's up? Why'd you stop? Why'd you only make it this big?
And the reason I had to bring because we're going full thread boy on it. So let's say the Munger quote for people is,
Charlie Munger, passed away, former vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway.
I believe in the discipline of mastering the best that other people have ever figured out. I don't believe in just sitting down and trying to dream it all up yourself. Nobody's that smart. You know, this is one of the smartest people around is saying that. And the point here is, this guy's figured a lot of it out. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, specifically for this use case anyway. So anyway, should we keep moving on? Was there anything else on that part that you wanted to opine on?
Because it's employee related. It's his definitions of, he talks about A, B, and C players. So I'll read the entire passage here. I have it in front of me. A players are obsessive, learn from mistakes, are coachable, intelligent, don't make excuses, believe in YouTube, see the value of this company, and are the best in the goddamn world at their job. B players are new people that need to be trained into A players. And C players are just average employees. They aren't obsessive and learning all the time. C players are poisonous and should be transitioned to a different company immediately, all caps. It's okay, we give everyone severance, they'll be fine. People will read this outside and be like, that's harsh, but you know what? That's, I mean, I've worked in corporations. I've been a C player where I mail things in, and I've worked with C players. It's awful to work with
Yeah,
those people.
yeah,
I
yeah. No
know
one
being
wants to be a
one.
part of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
that's
it. It
respect.
sucks,
Being
right?
honest, yeah.
But being a C player also means you shouldn't be there because you don't care about the job at
You'd
all.
be an A player somewhere else. That's the point. Is
Exactly.
you're not in the right environment. You need to just
I
move
just
on.
love how like he's not mincing words. And frankly, saw some blowback on this, and it was around that. It's like, oh, what about X, Y? It's like, man, you, working with C players is fucking awful. I've been a C player. I've heard and read things like I've had supervisors pull me and be like, hey, your team is like not happy. I know because I hate this job, right? And like I know what it feels like. So when I say this, I don't mean to be this like I've always been an A B player, but I would like to think that you should put yourself, like you said, Bilal, it's like find yourself in a situation where you can be an A player, right?
Good. Let's go into that a little bit because tell me about that if you don't mind because I've done it too. So I'll be honest, like that's
It was
happened to me.
Scotia. That's a running, like one of the running jokes
Yeah,
at this
the
podcast
Scotia
is
Bank.
Scotia Bank. So people don't know. I'll tell you, it's like well, fun fact: Elon Musk's first job ever, a
Scotia
corporate
Bank
job, was at
analyst or
Scotia
something,
Bank.
right?
Was as
Yeah.
an intern at Scotia Bank, which is I think the third biggest bank in Canada. But yeah, Bilal, to your point, I did an MBA, and that was my internship between the first and second semesters. And dude, I knew him day one. I put on my suit, went took the train to the job, rolled on in, hated the commute, and they put me in front of Excel, and literally within an hour, I'm like, I hate this place. Within 3 days in, I went to the person that hired me. Is like, because the whole point of getting hired for an internship is they expect to hire you afterwards full time, right? I went in, I'm like, listen, this isn't for me. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's not for me. I'll finish my internship out, help the team as much as
How
possible.
long ago was it into doing it? Sorry.
It was 3 months, and I went in 3 days later. And I was
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
and
You,
like
you gotta know sometimes.
for the next 3 months, I mean, I did like literally the bar minimum, and the team hated me. I knew they hated me, but it was an internship, and they'd already made their decision. But yeah, that was C player. I knew I was a C player. Like the C player stuff, man. So Bilal, throw it on your plate. Hit me.
No, I think the point here is that sometimes you, like I said, like you can be C player in one place but complete A player somewhere else, and you've clearly done that since. And I think a lot of people get disheartened because they haven't seen enough environments or experienced enough
That's a
environments.
great point.
And another
Yep.
example of this is just at school. To be honest, like some people are the equivalent of a C player at school. They're just not good at school in a normal system. But they might be so good at like practical things or like making content or writing or
YouTube.
whatever.
They might be
YouTube.
really good at YouTube.
Yeah, well, they might be like this guy since 12 years old or whatever, been locking himself in a room learning this stuff. So, yeah, the reason I bring it up is because sometimes you just got to remember, like, it's okay that this isn't the right fit. Now, like, the thing with me, what happened was it was when I was here and I didn't have a green card yet, so I couldn't leave my job. And I'll be honest, I was actually still pretty good at my job. I just stopped caring about it at that particular moment. So then you're automatically not an A player anymore. So that's a different thing. You need a distraction then.
I love that you brought that up. That happened to me twice because I needed a work visa in Vietnam to be able to live there. I needed one in America to be able to live in Boston. What you said is exactly my experience. Both times, I only kept those jobs and like put my head down, shut up, and did the bar minimum, not to get fired, right? Like it's actually crazy. It actually speaks a lot to immigration systems in general.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck.
You're stuck with the company. And I know, man, dude, I probably know a dozen people like this actually that have been through the same thing with me, getting H-1B visa or TN visa, all these different visas to work in America. How many people have you chat with? It's like, oh man, like I'm waiting to get my green card, or my visa expires in 3 months. Like I gotta keep my head down just to make sure it gets renewed, right? It's like,
yeah,
of course you're gonna be a C player. You don't care about the job, right?
yeah.
I'll add one more thing about the AC player dichotomy. Steve Jobs spoke about this widely. Another shout out to our friend David Senra. He did it on one of his podcasts about Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs said that he studied the Manhattan Project, and he was like, "Man, Oppenheimer. How did Robert Oppenheimer put this team together, like the best physicists in the world, and to make the A bomb?" And he said that his whole philosophy on team building was that A players only want to be with other A players. As in, if you put an A player with the C player and it's the same philosophy, it's like they're dragging. It's like A players don't want to like
slowed down. You're being
you're being
slowed down.
slowed down. They just want to be with other A players. And I get that. And I'm saying this again as a C player, right? And I get that. So there we go. I love that section. What's next?
That's great. All right, let's get on to the meat and drink here, which is what makes a YouTube video go viral. Now, this is something that, you know, if you make YouTube videos, you should have these 3 metrics. These are the ones that matter, and he talks about it multiple times. The 3 metrics you guys need to care about are click-through rate, aka CTR, average view duration, AVD, and average view percentage, AVP. Now, we could put that on the screen or
What's
whatever
AVP?
here.
I don't actually know that. That
Average
one's
view percentage. That's how many people viewed the whole thing, I think.
okay.
Or like the percentage that they viewed of the video.
I mean, Bilal, you know that you used to work at YouTube. So that's a holy trinity.
I mean, I'm just that last one. I'm making sure if it is a completion rate. I think it's a completion rate because the view duration is, you know, in YouTube Studio or the YouTube Analytics, you can see like the chart, right? In fact, I'll just show you a quick example on the screen. And I know Rafa was gonna bring up some of these anyway, but can you see my screen here?
Oh, okay. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so there's average view duration here so let's say it's a 14-minute video. People watch 7 minutes 24. Average percentage viewed 53. And then the good thing here is you can see the drop off over time. So he goes through, I think it's on the next few pages, but also for people who are watching, can you see the formatting here is just like terribly formatted, just massive chunks of text. But there's a lot of gold in it, but that's just shows this wasn't like this was like him in a room just banging it out on a piece of on Google Docs. And he gives like examples here of different types of charts, what they look like. But the point here is,
through those charts actually.
Let me just give me a second here. Let me see this because one second. The shape of the audience retention graph can tell you which parts of your video are most least interesting. So yeah, I mean, he's basically, people should really like go and read the full thing here. But he's given a good one is this. It's like right on the top. Like people are staying the whole way. And you'll see here, that means there's lots of drop off at different moments. Then there's people that are coming in for certain parts or rewatching. Can you see there? There's like 2 bumps there. And then here, there's dips where people are abandoning it. Now, like even from my experience, not with what we do, but having done some of it in the past with other people as well at YouTube and Google, like what happens is, you know, he talks about good lighting. Another really big one, which we've talked about with our pod, obviously, is sound. Like if you watch a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people who create videos, they will say like sound is something they wish they just got right from the start. And because you'll notice a difference when someone's just recording on like a camera with just a normal sound versus like they've got like a little clip-on mic or they've got the boom mic going or whatever. And now I will say a lot of the video cameras actually have okay sound, but back in the day, like if you see, I've got it right here. I used to record on these big camcorders, and the sound on those are so bad, man. Like as soon as you hear it, you don't even know what's happening as a viewer. You just know you don't want to watch it. It's like scratchy.
The running joke was I didn't have a proper mic until a year into us recording.
Well, Well, you did have some sort of mic, but if you didn't have, like now you got a much better mic. It sounds a lot better.
Yeah, you told me that you guys were yelling at me, but I was like, dude, just get the Shure mic. Just spend $300, bro.
Exactly. But yeah, so anyway, those 3 metrics, like I said, what I do like here is if you just go back to, this is specifically for YouTube. This is not Hollywood, right? Hollywood doesn't have these metrics to look at, right? And let's just go into each one. Click-through rate is how many people saw your thumbnail and title and clicked through. It's the equivalent of what you learn in your world, right? Is a headline, right?
Yeah.
Like how long, what's the rule? You know better than I do. As a writer, you can write the best thing in the world, but if you don't write a good headline, no one's going to click into it.
Do you know what? I backed it up actually. We talked about this previously. I actually wasn't crazy about this, but I think you can relate. I would pick an article on whether or not I could have a good headline. You know what I mean? Is like, and I actually had lessons from writing for The Hustle, email newsletter. Now I think over 2 million readers a day, but at my time it was about 1.5. I would pick headlines, and to write the story on. Like if I read news stories, I'm like, this one doesn't have a big number. It's like numbers were always huge. Anytime you can slap like the $11 billion mailing company or the $100 billion opportunity, numbers always work. Anything to do with sex obviously always sells. Like OnlyFans always slapped when we had it in the subject line. But blah, there's like very similar, right? I guess now it's the open rate for the email. And he actually has, now that you brought that point, I'm going to read to you what he wrote. He wrote about virality and the click-through rate. And he talks about titling, and we will know this and we will understand this. He's like, here is an example of two titles, right? Which one is more clickable? And he goes, I spent 50 hours in my front yard versus I spent 50 hours in ketchup. He goes, both of those will probably take the same amount of work to do, like as an idea. But then this is what he reads. This is what he writes. I spent 50 hours in front of my front yard is lame and you wouldn't click it. But you would hypothetically click, I spent 50 hours in ketchup. Both are relatively similar in time and effort, but the ketchup one is easily 100 times more viral. An image of someone sitting in ketchup in a bathtub is exponentially more interesting than someone sitting in their front yard. There you go. I'm going to add a side note here because MrBeast, as part of his other business empire, does Feastable chocolate bars, and he did MrBeast Burger. I think MrBeast Burger has kind of scaled back because of quality control.
We haven't talked about it today, but him, Logan Paul, KSI, just launching the Lunchable.
Lunchly. I was about to joke about that. Lunchly. So for people who don't know Lunchables, it's that thing that I think Schneider used to make. It was like the cracker, the cheese, the ham, and like a juice box. Super bad for you. Awful for kids.
Yeah.
It's just like processed food to the max. And like the reason I brought that up is, man, ketchup is just terrible. Ketchup is literally 80% sugar, and it's not related to what MrBeast wrote here, but I think the Lunchly thing is terrible, and I would not feed that to my kid. Is what I'm saying. I agree.
Likewise, yeah.
But that's a sidebar.
We ate it and we turned out okay-ish.
That's true. I didn't.
To be fair, it's not halal, but I had.
Did you do Dunkaroo? Or did you do?
I remember the name, but we might have had a different name of it. But I didn't have all that. I didn't have a lot of it because it was I was keeping it nice and halal, which actually helped me back in the day because they didn't. It was a lot of like there's like ham in it, I guess, right? So I didn't have all that stuff.
But keep walking.
I was going to give another example. We'll come back to that topic, but similar example. Do you remember the Doritos thing you talked about? So this was under a topic called creativity saves money. So I'm jumping ahead, but it's similar to what you just said about the ketchup. So it was basically saying which sounds cooler to you as a prize for a gaming video, $20,000 or a year's supply of Doritos. So like again, back to the title, it's like if the prize is someone wins $20,000, it's kind of just like plain. It doesn't really translate to anything. But if you say a year's supply of Doritos, that's something tangible. It's kind of fun. And even like there's, like a lot of this stuff you can apply to other worlds. That's what's interesting. Like even like charity water, that was everything we were doing in storytelling there was about translating. If you say, $30 will give someone, just give us $30 a month. That's very different to saying $30 will give one person clean water, for example. So like just translating it to something tangible straight away when you do that.
Right? You're right.
Yeah, and you have an image in your head of like, someone drinking a glass of water, especially if you now tell that story of the person's name, what they do and all that sort of stuff. So I've done a few podcasts on this sort of stuff. That one that's come to mind, a guy called Tyler Reaver. He's the kind of chief storyteller, the head creative guy there. If you guys are interested, you can go on YouTube and watch that. But
I want to tell you something about that you brought up there.
Yeah, go for it.
The Doritos, he did the math, ended up costing about $1,300. So he's making a point. Be creative. It's not just going to reflect better on screen. It'll actually save money for the business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so that was like, I read that. I'm like, damn, that is like, that. There's the levels that he's thinking here, right? He's like, we could have given somebody $20,000 or a year's supply of Doritos. A, more viral. B, could probably get those Doritos for free from Doritos, and you've saved yourself $20,000, right? It's like, be creative. Try to maximize this business, right?
All right, Trung. So just the last thing on that, you've heard him talk about this on the Rogan pod, I remember, and it's in the doc as well. You know, the 3 metrics. So click-through rate is how many people click through. Average view duration is how many people are staying there and actually viewing your thing. Average view percentage is basically the completion rate, from my understanding. Now, the reason I bring that up is, have you noticed him talk about ending abruptly? And we should be doing this on our pod. We don't, by the way, we don't do any of this stuff on our pod, let's be honest, yeah? But regardless, I know for a fact, like, if you watch any of his videos, have you seen how quickly they end at the end?
He puts it in, he bolded it. But can you tell us, can you give us the logic behind that, Bilal?
And the point is, one is like a metrics thing, and 2 is a psychological and a feeling thing. Like, and a lot of pods do this. I know my First Million friends at the pod as well. They do this quite a bit. They'll end the pod super quickly, and now it feels like behind the scenes now if we do it on our pod. But you know, whatever, you guys get the idea. If you're having a good time, you're listening to something and you're really enjoying it, and it ends abruptly, you're kind of left in that state. Right, versus being like what most YouTubers do, and we do it as well. It's like 30 seconds end screen, and you've got the click for the other links and whatever. He's just like, end it quickly, and it signals, this is where the metrics come in, it signals to YouTube and the platform, people completed the full video. That means they liked it. And what does YouTube want? They want people to watch a full video. That means they liked it. So that's my understanding of it anyway. What, did you have anything else to add on it?
No, I think you nailed it, man. That makes a lot of sense. It's like, it's a peak end idea, right? The peak end idea, for people that don't know, is like a psychological phenomenon where if you look at how people remember kind of, events in their lives, they'll remember the most intense experience and the end. And everything else kind of gets washed away. But like, I think the point that Bilal's making with this is like, this is the aphorism, end on a high note, right? It's like, end at the top. And I think the other part that you made, which is so smart, is if you end abruptly, from a YouTube standpoint, the viewer actually, they can't really click out, right? They're not like, oh, I'm gonna end here. It's like, they're kind of watching. It's like, oh man, what's going on? Boom, it's over. They can't, there's no decision making, right? It's like, they have to just. You
signaled you finished it. And I literally clocked it this morning. I was watching a YouTube video, some like, these health gym bro guys. And it was like a full on 45-minute video I ended up watching. And it was like the last 30 seconds were kind of dilly-dallying around. They're like, thanks for being here, blah, blah, blah. And by that point, I like switched to another video. And so it does, I think in that example, it's not that big a deal because YouTube still sees I watched 99% of it. But I get his point, especially in his world, it's micro, like these little incremental changes make a big difference. And it goes back to one of the best things on the Rogan pod I listened to, when it came out a few years ago of Jimmy, of MrBeast, is he talked about the exponential growth you get on YouTube. So like that one change, it doesn't just mean you get a few more views. It sometimes means you get 5 or 10 times more views. Because
he's a big power law guy, right? He's huge into that. He's like, I want to make one video that 100 million people will watch. Like they'll keep watching like 5-10 years later on, right? Versus, just look at NIA, and we're doing the complete opposite.
Yeah, because we don't optimize for YouTube at all, and we don't even, which, some of these things we should at least try. And then, Trung, I know you had one more thing to add, but related to what we're talking about, one of the sections is called 1 out of 10 is good, 10 out of 10 is bad. And for anyone who's ever made a YouTube video, you log on to the YouTube Studio app on your phone or on the website, and it shows you your video. Have you ever seen this, Trung? Because I don't know if you log
you show the ranking for the videos. Like, how did this rank in the first 15 minutes or whatever, right? Or
exactly.
First day.
And it's basically saying in the last, compared to your other videos, this ranks 10 out of 10. It means it's not doing as well, or 3 out of 10, or 1 out of 10. And so that's the sort of stuff these guys at that level, they're measuring, and they're making sure it's every time you're kind of getting better and better. All right, back to you, Trung. What was the next thing you had on your notes?
Okay, so the next thing I had was something called, this is very more manager. So we've gone from the video stuff, which Bilal has, really appreciate that last part. I totally slipped my mind on the ending abruptly. Genius call out. So here's more on the managerial side. He calls it a critical component. And again, this isn't reinventing the wheel. I think every manager, any HBS, Harvard Business School case study will have something along these lines, but this is how he names it. And he's basically saying, when you're creating a video, because you have to remember these MrBeast videos, they take like months to make, like in advance, right?
Millions of dollars sometimes.
You're
right?
scouting the sites. Before on your point about millions, I think at one point he's saying, I told Joe Rogan's like, yeah, I'm whatever. I make 10 million a month on ad revenue. So I'm putting all that back into the making of the videos. So like you're scouting the sites, you're buying all the props, XYZ. These take months. And his whole point about critical components is you need to identify for this next video, what are the 2 or 3 critical components? And he gives an example about, let's say that I want to buy an island or I want to give away an island. Okay, you can do a lot of things. It's like, are there trees on this island? Or like, what's the airplane we'll fly in on? He's like, the key here is like, can you get the island? That's a critical component. Can you buy an island on this budget? That's number 1. And the way he frames that is every video has 2 or 3 of these critical components. And he's like, when you're on that job, your only job is to tick those off. And he's trying to make his team efficient. He's like, you will get mobbed with emails, to-do lists, but it's very simple. I'm giving you the permission and the authority. If someone's asking you to do XYZ, but you're on a critical component, you gotta tell them to F off until you're done your job, right? And he talks about this a lot. And I think in the entire section, he named critical component, but he also talked about how to communicate with other team members. And he's a big guy about being in person. So obviously this is not a huge organization. And this is timely because Amazon yesterday just announced, right? Andy Jassy, CEO, wants all employees back 5 days a week as of January 2nd, 2025. Now, look, we're not going to get into the whole remote versus not remote debate here. I see benefits to both sides, with the caveat being there's literally no amount of money you could ever pay me to put me into an office again with commuting. You can offer me X amount of money. I will say no. I'm just not going to do it. I like the way my life is structured and stop. But I get it. I get the value of being in person. I get it so much, right? It's like the point that Andy Jassy made in that memo that he sent, they obviously an open memo so the whole world could see it. He's like, there's just too much processes, too many managers here. And remote, in our case, is not helping that. He wants more individual contributors, and he wants them in person because he believes that they can innovate faster. Now, the counter is this. NVIDIA is fully remote company, right? So, like, you can counter, and I made this segue because MrBeast talks about in person so much. He's like, you can solve so many things just in person. And he brings that up in the context of bottlenecks. Because they are on deadlines, he hates bottlenecks. And he's like, if an entire video is being held up, right? And it's like, the deadline's in 45 days, something that holds that back is just like, it just is so painful to him. So he's like, I want in-person communication as much as possible. And he also talks about how you should always give yourself more slack than you expect. Like, give yourself these buffer days. It's like, we're on deadline here. And that all goes back to critical component. I like the way he structures it and how in the weeds he is with this document about how to communicate. So I found that valuable. And blah, I don't know if you saw this part, but he talks about how he wants every team member to film everything they do, which is so on brand, right? And what he means, again, it goes back to the very top. We talked about consulting. We talked about this very document, this 36-page How to Succeed in MrBeast Production. It's about knowledge transfer. And this is what he said about filming. Like, if you're going to go see a site, or if you have to go get a car for this stunt, or you have to go buy food for this stunt, film it and then send it to the rest of the team. This is what he writes. What is more important, that one person has a good mental grip of something, or that the entire team of, say, 10 people have a good mental grip of something? Obviously, you want the team to have a good mental grip. And the easiest way to bring your team up to the same page is to freaking video everything and store it where they can constantly reference it. A lot of problems can be solved if we just see the video. That's so, I love how he said that. I love a lot of people actually, they're always like, okay, well, why did MrBeast just make this memo a video? Well, actually, the way that at the end of the day, like, text is still the
for stuff like this you can go make reference to it again. You go back, you can search the document.
Text is the best way for knowledge transfer.
And I think in some cases it's a combination. Like, you can have a version here, you can have, like, in a lot of organizations, you have a a guide like this, but you also have trainings in person. You have like on the job, discussions and stuff as well. And I will say a lot of people learn in different ways too. So it just depends. On that point, Trung, I just want to build on what you said, because there's actually a great little subsection here, which I loved, which was kind of related to what you said, but he said, be able to hold a camera. I know what you were saying there was slightly different, and what I like about it is he said, let me actually just pull up the full thing. 1 second here. Be able. Okay, this is quite a funny line. Obviously, everyone has their roles in the company, and to be honest, if you can consistently lead and produce videos for me with a 90% success rate, I don't care. Sorry, I'm reading slowly because he's got like all these abbreviations, and I'm not 21 years old. IDC, I don't care. If you piss in the sink every day, I'll still love you, which is also just a hilarious line. All right. And then he goes on to say, but having said that, it'd be nice if at some point you got training our style of holding a camera. There's a whole other, a few lines on that. But the reason I'm bringing that up is, again, the metaphor here is be able to hold a camera. What are they? They are a YouTube company. So even if you're a lawyer, you're someone who's like making sure, you're not liable when someone makes the world's biggest slice of cake. Like in all these companies, especially at that scale, like to be able to do the core thing, it doesn't mean you're the best camera person. It just means understand what we're doing. And again, just having worked in multiple companies and like the sort of companies I work with, even for my like agency stuff I do now, like you see the difference in the culture of the companies. Like it comes back to that like idea of founder mode stuff we've talked about as well. When you're at a smaller scale, you want people who are of that culture. So like, for example, you worked at Hustle. I don't know what it was like, what the culture was like. You don't need to say good or bad, but just in terms of writing, at least, whatever you can say about the people there, I don't know. But from the few, I spoke to you, Sam, and, or Sampar, and then, who else? Yeah, exactly. So, and so all of you can write really, really well, right? And obviously at different stages, you two are still writing. Sam originally was the one who was writing or whatever. Like to me, it just felt like if I spoke to someone from the Hustle, I assume they like even who's your other guy that you work with now? Sorry, my mind has gone blank with all names.
You mean
right
from
now.
Workweek?
Workweek, exactly.
Yeah,
Adam, right?
Adam,
exactly.
the
Sorry, I remembered his name before. Sorry,
yeah,
Adam. Adam has a newsletter, right? He's running his company, but he's writing as well. He's writing on Twitter. Like the point here is, if you're a media company, you should be probably making some form of media, even if you're doing it for fun or you're writing on the side. That's the point.
Yeah. No, I like that. That is a great call out.
And that's I like that metaphor. Be able to hold a camera is about, like he's saying, practically hold a camera the way we shoot, but it's also the idea of metaphorically everyone here should be able to jump in as well. That's kind of the point. So I really like that one as well.
He's empowering the team, right? That's the thing, is like he wants to create an environment. And what I will add is that some of the criticism that's come out from MrBeast over the summer were former employees saying, like, according to these videos, it's an unsafe work environment in certain places in this example, right? Or when he was doing like these charity things, it might not have been necessarily 100% altruistic, which, I mean, we talked about it before. It's like, Bilal, you worked in charity, right? How many people do something out of 100% altruism? There's just a whole episode of Friends. It's like, is there such thing as selfless giving? I mean, you've talked about this, right? It's like, I mean, well, can you actually answer that? It's like,
I think the answer is, yeah, it's selfless is it's like 100% pure.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to describe. That doesn't mean it has to be cynical and like people don't really want to do good for other people. I think there are lots of people who do want to do good for other people. In fact, look at your own family, right? Like you do stuff for your wife and your kid all the time.
Yeah.
That is not just for you. That's the best example. And so you 100% can do things for, like, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was something like, everyone is a communist with their family, basically. Like, a socialist.
You're a communist with your family.
Family, socialist for your community, or something like that.
Exactly, socialist with the community, and like capitalist when you're paying taxes.
That's it, exactly. And so I think that's the idea, without getting into the political debate of what that could mean. But it's the idea of course, you do things all the time. In fact, that is what family love is, right? It's like doing things that are not just for yourself. Like
that's the most that's to your point.
Yeah.
That And dude, that's just evolutionary, right? And
That's it.
it's like you're trying to, at the end of the day, we're just vessels to propagate our genes. Like that's a
And then,
reality.
but then to answer your question, do people do that for a stranger across the world or whatever? I think lots of people do, but there is obviously a percentage of, if it was a pie chart, yeah, are you trying to do 5, 10% or 50%, whatever it is for someone of feeling good, like I did something good, or is it 50% of I want to look good because I want to show off, or I want to, like, there's varying levels. For example, you do a charity ball where everyone turns up and shows they gave 100 grand in person and they're like everyone's celebrating and giving you high fives, versus there's people I met who gave in secrecy and basically said, I don't want to be known. I don't want you to write my name here. But I do want to know what's happening. I want to know this actually impacted the people. So there's different levels to it. You know what I mean? So the main thing is that I think a lot of people can be cynical about that as well.
The reason I brought it up is because, like, he cured 1,000 people of blindness or cataract surgeries, and people were getting mad about it. I'm like, man, I don't care if he's doing it for views. Like, he did something good, right? Like, if this is how he has to pay for it, who cares?
Yeah. Well, that's the example here. So yeah, anything else on that part, Trung?
I only have 2 more hanging ideas that I'll throw up. If you have any more, please add them. But I'll wrap up with these 2 bullet points and just jump in right afterwards. Okay, so I love this one. He talks about making content, and it's about spending money, right? So previously we had talked about how he's like, give somebody $20,000, it's not viral. A year's worth of Doritos, viral, and you save money. So another thing he said is this: I want money spent to be shown on camera, ideally. If you're spending over $10,000 on something and it won't be shown on camera, seriously think about it. This sounds obvious, but I guarantee you that that's the thing, is like, you actually know how much he cares about his business and how much why it's so successful, because of the way he talks about these things. No dollar is being wasted, right? And I respect the hell out of that and the way he runs that. But the last thing I want to add was the way that he talked about why these things are even being made. I don't know if you caught this, but it's like, he basically said, why somebody's asked, like, why are we making this? Like, what is the purpose of making these videos? Like, what is the end goal? And he literally just writes, it's like, it's to entertain me. It's like, will this thing entertain me? He's the ultimate arbiter of these videos.
That's I love this point. Yeah.
He's just like, I'm making this to entertain myself. Is like, and because his taste is so fine tuned. And this goes to stuff that we've talked about Rick Rubin, how this is a major lesson, right? It sounds woohoo, but when you actually think about it, there's so many layers to Rick Rubin's line that I always repeat. It's from also a Joe Rogan podcast he did. Oh no, sorry, he did this one with Barry Weiss on the Honestly podcast, and he just said, "I do everything for your own taste." This was Rogan actually. He goes, because a lot of people want to do what does the audience want, right? And he goes, well, that's actually a very narcissistic and kind of egoistic perception, because you're basically saying, I can guess what millions of people want.
Yeah.
Like, you're all seeing, you're omnipotent, right? That's actually a lot more arrogant, if you think about it, than just being like, I'm just going to do what I like. You know what you do. You truly know what you like. Yeah. And so that's a much more, so like, and the part that's interesting about that, and actually the nitty gritty part is like, you should actually.
I think it makes a lot of sense for content, but I'll come back to that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's different for like a product where you're solving a particular need, but
you're right. This is very content art. This is content art.
That's it. It's the creative part, which is harder to. There's not a metric that literally tells you, oh, someone bought this and did surgery with it, therefore that actually worked.
That can't just be your taste. That actually has to work. Right?
Exactly.
But the part about the art, thank you for clarifying that, is it's actually very practical too. Is because if you're doing it for yourself, you can actually spend 20 years doing it. You know what I mean? It's because you're not waking up like me going to Scotiabank, be like, oh my God, I want to kill myself, right? It's like you wake up, you're excited. And if you can do something for 30 hours, which is what MrBeast has done with YouTube, 50 hours at this point, you're going to be an absolute gangster on that. So I like how that's just in the document, right? It's just like, I'm trying to like entertain myself. And it's just so true. And so those are my last 2 points.
I think that's a great point. And actually this, I think, does bring us on to the balance of the discussion, which is being honest about that is difficult, because when you start creating stuff online and you put it, or not just online, anywhere, automatically humans are wired in a way that it's very difficult to not hear the feedback and be like, oh, I need to change something, I need to do this. Like, having clarity of vision is probably I think one of the hardest things with anything creative specifically. And so I would actually say for him, I love the sentiment. I don't think they always necessarily do that though, because if you go back to what he's saying, is I'm editing stuff based on the metrics and like where people dropped off, and I don't want to do that anymore. Now, like, two things can be true. You can say the lighting wasn't good, let's fix the lighting, and still be working on the taste. But for example, when he was on a 2-hour podcast telling people, oh, don't say that thing because it's going to hurt retention, that's actually the opposite of creating something for yourself. And so I think there is a balance. And me and Zaid Admani on Creator Lab did this. He listens to our pod as well. We did a whole segment on, has MrBeast ruined YouTube? Yeah. And the kind of people have talked about this idea of the MrBeastification of content, and the balance of, is that good or bad? And I will argue that in this case, if you are truly just creating stuff for yourself and not the algorithm, they are actually two different things a lot of the time. And so one of the lines I do like of his, which is when people say the algorithm didn't like my video, he says replace the word algorithm with people didn't like my video, which I think is a very smart thing for YouTube. Though I don't actually agree with that sentiment across the internet, because we've talked about this as well, like X or Instagram or TikTok it rewards things with comments, and basically sensational stuff pops up more. And that's what people mean by they made something for the algorithm. Everyone's seen a line where you're like, okay, that was
audience capture, right? We talked about it. It's audience capture. It's like, if you do the lowest hanging fruit meme, people will like it, but it doesn't actually mean that it
But that's the point though. Let's be even with yourself though. Like, if you ask yourself at the content you make, and I'm not saying you do this, but everyone does it to a certain extent. Yo, Bilal
calling me out, bro.
No, I'm saying, no, I'll give an example from observing you and knowing you through the pod. Obviously, you know yourself better than I do. But will you catch yourself being like, oh, I need to post this on Twitter because it's going to go viral, versus the feeling you get when you write 10,000 word Substack, right? Your weekly newsletter is purely just the equivalent of what you said. You're writing for a trunk who would like to read your stuff. Right, I agree.
They're two different.
Yeah, and so it's not like your memes are that too, but there are times, I'm sure, not just you, anyone on Twitter or anywhere else is being like, oh, that's going to go viral, or people are going to like that, there's going to be engagement, or this is going to help my channel grow, this is going to help my Twitter grow. So it is very difficult to balance those two things. And so I think all of these things, like creative stuff, there's not one way to do it. That's why I said a lot of this stuff, you should take what's good out of it and apply it to your work. Or do what we do and apply zero of it and just talk about it for an hour. You know what I mean? So that's basically what we're doing here. But no, I do think there's so many amazing things in it. And I think he's done a really great job of just capturing that stuff in his head. I also wanted I was going to say this before, to clarify, I made a slight mistake earlier when we were going through the metrics, click-through rate, average view duration, and an average view percentage. I think I misspoke and said average view percentage was how many people completed it. It's actually the percentage they completed. So it will be like 56% or 72%. Just want to clarify that. To me, that's basically close to average view duration, but in a percentage term. So those are the three metrics they'll be looking at religiously though. And he gives screenshots and visuals of that in the PDF.
Yeah, I agree. We'll do abrupt ending on this. It's like, read the doc. Let's move on to we're going to finish up, with the power broker.
There we go. That was great stuff. All right, Trung, why don't you tell us about the power broker? And also let us know what you think of that. I learned a lot from doing that. And in full transparency, I've skimmed through the doc. I need to read literally word for word, go through it, but I got ideas. I need to go back and reread it. Let us know what you think of that. There are lots of really good things in there. Trung, tell me about the power broker turning 50. I have not read this book, but I know it's a classic. What is going on here with this book, mate? I know you're a fan.
Not only have you need to read it, you live in New York, bro.
That's true.
I mean, this is for people who have never read The Power Broker, and I'll do full disclosure. It's 1,344 pages. I've read half of it. I've
Okay.
never finished this book.
That's funny. Okay,
So
fair
like,
enough.
I mean, but it's like, it is the Bible for people living in New York. It's about urban planning. It's about power and about how this guy Robert Moses was able to basically influence the building of New York in the I think let me give the time frame in the 20s, 30s, 40s, right? And I'm gonna name some places that he influenced Bilal, and you tell me if you've ever been to them. And the answer is yes, right?
Okay,
So
well,
he worked on the parkway systems, right? So Long Island State Park Commissioner. So he was that. He helped build a bunch of parkways. Have you ever been to the Long Island? Have you ever been to what would be Jones Beach State Park?
I don't
Jones
know if
Beach
I
is in
have.
Long Island.
Let me.
Okay.
Oh no, this looks in Yeah, this is a bit further out. This is like in down Long Beach, so I don't think I have now.
Have you done any of the Triborough bridges? That's him.
The
He did the
Triborough bridges.
highways, Cross Bronx Expressway, Brooklyn Queens Expressway.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now he's done a bunch of public housing, which some people are calling slums. A lot of parks and playgrounds. Um, he was the crucial development of the Lincoln Center. Bilal's definitely been there. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm listing these places off is he basically, through various positions he held, unelected positions, as he was the Long Island State Park Commissioner, New York City Park Commissioner, New York State Park Commissioner, Chairman of the Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, New York City Planning Commission, New York State Power Authority Chairman. And the reason I mention all these like gobbledygook names that people are going to forget instantly, he got all these positions, unelected positions, because he had realized the way to wield power was to get the decision-making seats that people had no idea. And this is like, and the author of this book, the reason why we're talking about today, Robert Caro, who himself is a fascinating character. So we've talked here about the Lyndon B. Johnson series. Have you read any of Robert Caro's Lyndon B. Johnson books? So if you don't know, listeners don't know, Robert Caro has written 4 books about Lyndon B. Johnson, which is the president of the United States between when Kennedy got assassinated, 63 to 68. But prior to that, he was arguably the most powerful senator in the 20th century. Lyndon B. Johnson's career was figuring out how to wield power within the United States political system. Robert Moses was in these parks commissioner, highway commissioner, all these commissions he had, was an individual that wielded power specifically in New York. And man, anyone that's been in New York and lived in there, the city, the way the traffic's done, where housing is made, where the parks are, who gets to live where the gentrification happens, where minorities live, it was all influenced by Robert Moses.
Yeah.
And when Robert Caro was writing this book, this is why it's such a Bible for the city, right? So I'll give you an example, like Goldman Sachs former CEO, Lloyd Blankfein, I believe this is his favorite book, but he said he cut the book in half because it was so big, and then, like, he would travel with it to finish it.
Oh,
right?
that's funny.
Yeah, and like, do you ever listen to 99% Invisible?
I don't, but I know what it is. Yeah.
So I would recommend this for anybody listening. If you want a podcast recommendation, 99% Invisible's entire season this year for 2024 is about the power broker. They're reading every chapter and then talking about it, because 99 Invisible is about a lot about urban planning, about buildings, and this explains how these things happen. Now, I'm going to talk more about Robert Moses before I talk about Robert Caro, because he's a super interesting character. Robert Caro, the author. But go ahead. You had a question.
No, I was just going to say, so the point, you wanted to talk about how Robert Moses, kind of the lessons of him wielding power. You sent some stuff to me before, right?
Yeah, that's the point. So I kind of give an idea of all the things he'd built, but like and it's in the title of the book. And this is why Robert Caro investigated him, is like the book's called The Power Broker. Robert Caro's books, and now he wrote The Power Broker in 1974, 50th anniversary. And then he spent 40 plus years just writing about Lyndon B. Johnson. The entire point is about power. And he has this great quote. He goes, power reveals is what he means. It's like what you know about somebody, when they become powerful, it's like, does power change somebody? It's like, no, it doesn't change them. It just reveals who they are, because they get to do what they have with
wanna
that power, right?
Yeah, people say that often about money too. It just kind of magnifies who you are. If you're a giving person, you'll give more. If you're someone who's stingy and like cynical, you be that person even more. Exactly.
So the power broker, literally, it's in the title. It's about power. So I'm going to talk through a couple lessons from the book before I talk about the making of the book, and we can wrap up after that. So Robert Moses, again, shaped much of the infrastructure and urban planning in 20th century New York, massively influenced the most important city in the middle of the 20th century, right? And a lot of people didn't know this because he wasn't an elected official. So like he was protected by somebody named Governor Al Smith. Al Smith used to be the governor of New York. But like as Robert Moses held all these positions through decades, people went and came and went, right? Like Nelson Rockefeller, a scion of the Rockefeller family, would become the governor of New York. And him and Moses had a terrible relationship. Or like take an FDR. FDR, who's the president of the United States during World War II, had to finagle port resources from Robert Moses. The most powerful person in the world had to deal with Robert Moses because Robert Moses controlled the ports in New York City. You know what I mean? So this guy was a major figure. And so some of his, I'm gonna reel off some of the notes I took. What are the lessons from Robert Moses? You have to control the money, okay? So he had all these different positions, and the most salient one is a tri-borough authority, because a tri-borough authority has a right to issue bonds. And then when you can issue bonds, that means you get the revenue from if you sell the bonds, you get the money. You get to control what happens with that money. So he realized.
I thought you were about to transition to Scarface quotes here, man. You get them.
First come
you
the
get
money,
the money, then you get the power, then you get the respect.
Then you get the respect.
There's something else he says
women,
too.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Street Vibes Below definitely sold a T-shirt with that on there, bro. I'm not gonna lie, with the fire exactly, of Scarface. Right? There we go.
So he's like, you control the money, and this lesson comes up with Lyndon B. Johnson too, as a senator. Lyndon B. Johnson got himself into the right Senate committees where he controlled like the arms resources, the defense spending. Right? When you control the money, you can do some crazy shit. And Robert Moses, he didn't care about getting elected. He cared about controlling the money. So he found out what park commissioner positions he could get himself into. Now, he still needed people to protect him, right? It was where Governor Al Smith comes into place. So another thing that was a lesson from Robert Moses is you build a network of influence. So you start doing trade-offs. So if Governor Al Smith wanted some pretty dirty stuff done politically, he'd have Robert Moses kind of trade off the money, and he'd protect Robert Moses in exchange, right? So like Robert Moses would have these relationships with journalists, with politicians, and like, I mean, a lot of it's quite shady, if we're being frank. A lot of corruption's going on here because actually New York in the early 20th century is a very corrupt place to do politics. There's a machine, if you ever Google, it's called Tammany Hall. It was like this political machine that was exchanging favors for, you get politicians elected, and how do you do it, right? You have groups of immigrants, this Italian group, this Irish group, and you have leaders of those different groups. They get political favors in exchange for guaranteeing votes for the governor. So a lot of that's going on. So he also mastered the bureaucracy. How do you navigate lawmaking? How does the state of New York write laws? When they're writing laws in Albany, how is that happening? He understood the entire process. This parallels with Lyndon B. Johnson. One of the books that Robert Caro, the author, who is now 35, he was born in 1939, I believe. One of the rules that he wrote about Lyndon B. Johnson, one of the books was titled Master of the Senate. It's because people may not know this, but people will know this. The Senate and the House, right? The Congress and the Senate are supposed to be equal footing with the executive branch. The legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch in the United States Constitution, they're supposed to be equal across the board. And that's changed a lot as the country's gotten bigger and the government's gotten bigger. The executive branch has gotten extremely powerful, but more powerful than the other branches, some would argue. And well, it's not someone to argue. That's just a fact now. But Lyndon B. Johnson, why the book was titled Master of the Senate, is because Lyndon B. Johnson figured out how the House works. He understood House voting, Senate voting, how to put bills into place, and how to get things done better than any senator in the 20th century, and arguably ever. Robert Moses did that for New York politics, for New York bill making, for New York resource expenditure. So he's a genius of that. Accumulate a lot of these titles. We've talked about that. He was a very big long-term thinker. He wanted to build things, right? Like he didn't go in trying to screw people, which is the big criticism of Robert Moses, is he put a lot like he put highways where there was like minority housing, right? Like where African Americans and Latinos would live. And he would just kind of give them really like shitty areas to live in. And he'd be helping more higher income, a lot of times white, upper middle class people access to these different, roads to like the Long Beach beach park or these national or these state beaches. So like there's a huge criticism about Robert Moses. I mean, that was one of the big things that came out of this book. But I'll just wrap up that. Do you have any thoughts on Robert Moses as a person that lives in New York and TLDR?
No, I think it's cool. No, you can keep going.
Okay, you definitely got to read the book now. I don't.
No,
I
it'll
don't
take me about 3 years to read that. It sounds like.
And I still haven't finished it, so I'm not going to be super critical. Last thing I'll just cook is on Robert Caro. So Robert Caro, a super fascinating individual, right? He spent the last 40 years just writing about Lyndon B. Johnson, and the book, the Power Broker. What I love, and this parallels with actually with MrBeast, how MrBeast went all in on YouTubing. It's like Robert Caro went all in on being like an investigative biographer. So he started writing The Power Broker when he was 32-ish. I think he got like a $5,000 advance. I don't know what that works out to today. Call it $50,000. He got $5,000 advance, $50,000 today to write this book. But he is such an insane researcher, like infamously famous. Oh no, famous, not infamous. Famous researcher. Perhaps Conan O'Brien calls him the greatest researcher in the history of the written word. So like for this book, The Power Broker, it took him 7 years. He had to sell his home because him and his wife, Ina, had to sell their home because they ran out of that advance almost instantly. As soon as he started writing this book, he was a reporter previously. He did something called Turn Every Page. That's his philosophy about researching. That's also the name of a documentary about Robert Caro. An editor that he'd worked for told him, turn every page. And what that meant was when you're researching documents, when you're going down to the New York City offices of construction, and they give you 10,000 boxes or 10,000 documents in 50 boxes, you literally turn every single page and read every document. And that was his philosophy. And so he'd famously like do weeks of research for a single sentence, right? So he invested his life, basically almost a decade, researching this book, and it almost cost him everything. It cost him his home, and he went broke. He did go broke, and the 7 years, 1 million words. They ended up his editor cut 350,000 words. So a book is about 300,000 words, 200,000. They cut That's books wild. Worth of books to make this thing print. And he said that afterwards, he couldn't even read those pages anymore. It was so painful to him. But I'll just talk through his process quickly, and then we can wrap it. He wrote this all on a Smith Corona typewriter. I still did it today, 50 years later, still his process. His first part, though, before he does typewriting, he writes everything longhand. So he wrote 1 million words longhand, handwritten, retypes it on his typewriter in triple space, newspaper style. The reason it's triple space is so you can edit it. He then edited it by hand, rewrite it dozens of times. So this is his process over 7 years. He's continued to do that for 40 years. And I'll wrap it with this abrupt ending. Read Robert Moses's the book, The Power Broker. Read all of Lyndon B. Johnson books, some of the greatest books ever written, and then read Robert Caro's book. It's called Working. It's about his process. And a lot of the most recent stuff is based on this Curbed article in New York Magazine that interviewed him for the 50th anniversary. Let's end on that because I'm running out of steam.
That's great. No, that was a good little breakdown. Thanks for that, Trunk. And hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know what you think of this, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.